Melanie Closs is a theater artist, musician, and educator whose passions inspired her investment in girls' empowerment. She's the founder and executive director of the Other Side Intercultural Theater Incorporated, a cross-cultural performing arts and technology program to connect girls from underserved communities. By educating girls through performance and storytelling, the Other Side inspires self-esteem, leadership, empathy, and so much more. She has implemented the Other Side programs in multiple schools around the world, and through them is weaving sisterhood globally. You may read more about the Other Side at theothersidenyc.org.
Well, thank you, Melanie, for joining me today. I can't wait to talk about the Other Side and all the awesome programs that you've been running through the nonprofit.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just start telling me about what the Other Side's about and how it got started.
Sure. The Other Side is centered on empowering girls and uplifting the voices of girls and also gender diverse people through theater and also through technology and connection. So we work with girls in different parts of the world. At the moment, New York City and rural India. And we use some theater techniques and theater tools to allow them to explore what are some challenges that they face in their communities, and what is their life like, what is their culture, what is their identity, and then they share all of that with like a sister group that's in the other country using technology and storytelling techniques. And what we do is we're building a sisterhood between girls. And our big catchphrase is global sisterhood. So if anyone's like, what's the other side? Global sisterhood is the best way that I like to describe it. The theater part and the technology part are sort of like tools that we use to get there, but that's the main purpose of it. We're building empathy, we're building confidence, and we're building community through these techniques. I am the founder of The Other Side. I traveled around the world, and I traveled to India in 2010, so 10 years ago, actually, just about exactly 10 years ago, I was there. And I fell in love with a community in a place called Anupshahr, which is in the Bulandshahr district in Uttar Pradesh, which is in North India. I was a volunteer. I was teaching drama at the time, and I was really moved by this community, which was so different culturally from anything that I had ever experienced before. But what really moved me is that I could still connect with a lot of these people, and especially the women. And the types of challenges that we face as women were so different because of our cultural norms. And yet we could relate on this level of, as women, we have certain types of expectations and pressure put upon us, and we could really connect in that kind of human way. So I wanted to figure out a way to bridge the gap between cultures, between the communities that I see in New York City, which is where I'm from, and this community in Anupshahr. And my background, my training is in theater education. I went to Emerson College, and I have a bachelor's in theater education. And I always knew that I wanted to use theater as a tool for social change, not to be like a drama teacher in a high school putting on plays. Nothing wrong with that. That wasn't for me. And I had discovered Theater of the Oppressed, and I was kind of getting interested in some of those more applied theater, devised theater, popular theater kind of approaches, which I can talk more about maybe later if people need definitions. But that inspired me to want to figure out ways that I could use theater with a community to inspire change. And so this kind of brought everything together at that point in my life. And I was also working with another theater company doing education. And so then I began the process of building a nonprofit, which is a long and tedious process. And now 10 years later, we work with 2 schools in India, 2 communities in New York City. We're growing, and also everything has now become online because of COVID, which is actually kind of perfectly aligned with our work. It actually works out pretty well for us because we already were halfway there through the technology connection between girls, um, and uh, and so that's kind of the origin story of the other side, and also a little bit more about me and how it got started.
So tell me more about the theater of the oppressed and some of the approaches and techniques with that.
Sure. So theater of the oppressed, there's really a lot that one could read and study about theater of the oppressed. There's actually a whole other nonprofit which I'll shout out right now called Theater of the Oppressed NYC, and they do really great work in New York City, working with different groups and doing forum theater, which is a particular type of theater where people put together plays that they create on their own about real life scenarios. And there's always a conflict, there's always a protagonist in the story. And then what they do is they have the audience members actually jump into the protagonist's shoes and try out different things to try to solve that problem that they presented. So it's called spect actor. So like the spectator becomes the actor. So the audience member becomes the actor. And that's called forum theater. We don't use forum theater in the other side because it doesn't quite work with the age groups we work with. We're working with ages 8 to 18, and I'm sure that we could do forum theater with them, but we tried it the first couple of years and it just like didn't really land well.
Yeah.
But what we use more of in the theater of the oppressed pedagogy and canon is something called image theater, which is where you would take an idea and just create a statue, create an image to show a problem, to show a relationship or a character. And then there's a lot of different activities that you can do around that. And that works really well for us because we do have people who come from different cultures and different places, and there's might be a language barrier, which is sometimes it's a language barrier, and sometimes it's like a cultural language barrier where there's some colloquialisms and accents and things like that. So if you just have a still image, that works a lot better. And I think the main thing that's important to know about Theater of the Oppressed is that it is theater for people who are not intending to become actors per se. It's for people, everyday people, communities, groups of people who feel like there's a problem in their community, that feel like there's a challenge there, feel like there's something that's keeping them from getting the things that they deserve, their rights, human rights that they have. And that's why it's called Theater of the Oppressed, because it's people who are in a group that feels that they have a challenge or a roadblock to getting the things that they need. And the theater is just a way of illuminating those problems and showing those things, and also being able to put yourself into someone's shoes and empathize with a different story or different person. And it's also kind of a safe way to talk about these problems. Sometimes it can be very vulnerable and very scary to come forth and say, this is a problem that I face in my community. When you make it theatrical, when you put it on a stage, you can kind of make it about someone else. It doesn't have to be you. It doesn't have to be your name. And you can talk about it in that like safer third person kind of way, and also share it with an audience. And there's actually a really rich history of using theater for social change in India. People have used street plays for many years because there's so many villagers who are illiterate. So in order to read a pamphlet or read something, they wouldn't understand it. But if you could come into their village and stand in the village area and put on a play that's super active and super loud and captures everyone's attention, and it's talking about topics like dowry and child marriage, those are things that are going to actually make a change in their minds of the villagers. And that is something that we have done with our students, with the communities in India that we work with.
When you talk about language barriers, has that been like a major issue in communicating between the two groups? Or, I don't know. I know there's obviously a local language in a lot of communities in India, but I know a lot of them do speak English. So how is that? How have you been able to overcome that? I know you did talk about that Theater of the Oppressed and using images.
Yeah. So the communities that we work with in Uttar Pradesh primarily speak Hindi. And I've gone over there a number of times. It's a very special place for me. I've gone there 10 times for 10 years, and it's like a second home for me. But I don't speak Hindi, actually, and it's kind of sad. I really should learn it. But I can speak a little bit of Hindi. I can kind of get by with a mix of Hindi and English. The schools are English medium schools, which means that they're supposed to be learning English, but they don't really.
Really?
A lot of the teachers don't speak English, so they are studying for the exams totally in English, but that they're just studying for the exams. There's also an English communication department at one of the schools, and that's been growing over the past couple of years, and that has really expanded their ability to speak English and communicate in English. But the first couple of times that I went, it was really a big challenge, and I did have a translator, but even the translator, so this is kind of what I'm thinking, what I'm talking about, like even if the translator understands English, but when I say something and I don't even know that I'm saying it this way, I might say something that's a totally colloquial way of saying something that's from New York or from the United States. They might not understand what I'm talking about, even if they understand all the words I said. You know what I mean? There's more to communication than language, I feel.
Absolutely.
And so that was certainly a challenge, and it helped to have, like, that first year in 2010 that I went there, really there was almost no one who could speak English fluently. And so a volunteer came in from who's from India, and she speaks Hindi and English fluently. She also happened to be an artist, so she could also understand some of the concepts that I was talking about. Like, for example, the first time I was there, and I said, "What are some of your ideas about this?" That concept of being asked for their creative ideas was something that these girls have not been asked before.
Right.
And they didn't understand what it meant to, like, think of an idea.
Yeah, I'm sure they were speechless.
So, and they'll just, if one girl says, "Oh, I think that's a basket," then everyone says, "Yeah, that's a basket. That's a basket." It's really hard for them to know to be creative. And so this other teacher who happened to be, she was a volunteer who happened to be an artist, was able to kind of explain in Hindi what that means to have an idea about something. And that was 10 years ago. Now, when I ask, "What are your ideas about something?" everybody's got an idea. Everybody's creative. So that's definitely something that has to do with confidence and getting used to being asked for your own opinion. And that's definitely something, a testament to the school. But I also think that our classes have had a lot to do with building up their confidence. You doing drama, doing plays and communication has really helped them to build up their confidence. Now, actually, we're doing Zoom classes, and we actually have a teacher from New York who's teaching the classes in India. Usually we have a teacher in India who does that class. She's also there, but she's not on our payroll, so she's like a volunteer. So we have the teacher in New York who is teaching the classes in India, and the girls that we're working with are the 12th grade girls who have really good English skills. So they can, like, mostly understand everything. But there are a few of those little cultural moments where the teacher will explain something and they just, like, won't understand what they mean. And sometimes I do, like, simplified translating from English to English, because I kind of understand what the girls in India can understand because I've been going there for so long. But it would be helpful to have a translator, and that's something that we're working on right now, to kind of have a translator in our classes that really understands both languages. I also want to mention that all of our students in New York are also bilingual, and the community we work with in the Bronx are Latinx, so Spanish is their first or second language, and our teaching artist speaks both Spanish and English, so that's also really helpful. There's a couple of moments when they'll present something in Spanish instead of English because there's a concept, there's an idea that just fits better in Spanish language, a cultural thing.
Absolutely.
So it's important to have the language connector as well as the cultural connector.
Absolutely. But it's really interesting that you mentioned saying, like, asking these girls, like, what's your idea, or what are your thoughts about your opinions or your
Mm-hmm.
feedback? And that's a cultural thing, but I feel like that's a cultural thing here too.
Hmm.
Like, even this idea of asking a woman, what's your idea? What do you feel? I mean, just saying, like, in a boardroom or in a meeting at work. I
Yeah,
mean, you would think that we're like, quote unquote, past that, but I feel like a lot of times we're not. So it's
yeah,
it's
that's
something that
true.
it, we're getting closer, but we're not even there yet. I mean, we are closer, but we're not there yet. So it's crazy. It's interesting that
It's
you you
true.
you broke it down like that. Um, so how do you implement programs in, like, other schools, or have you been branching out with the other side?
So, growth is interesting. I usually I don't know if I could really give you any clear formula about what works.
Mhm.
I've had some things where a board member knows somebody at a school and they introduce us, and there's that personal connection, so I can like meet the person
Mm.
that I'm vouched for through the board member.
Yeah.
We talk, we discuss, what our program is, what their needs are, and then we build something around that and we develop a partnership. There's other times where I've reached out cold, and that's worked. Just said,
Mhm.
I like your program, looks good. I think we might be a good fit, and sometimes that just works fine. Um, but I would say the longer lasting partnerships have been the ones where I've had a personal connection or a personal introduction to somebody. We also have another program didn't that we did for one semester, and for various reasons we couldn't continue. We might continue again in
Mhm.
Kenya.
Ooh, okay.
And so I'm hoping that we're still in touch. We still really like want to work together. There were some technical, like logistical issues that
Mhm.
prevented us from working together, but we're still in touch, and I hope that's something we can continue, because that's also a beautiful community that where girls are having a hard time. It's in a
Mhm.
big slum in Nairobi,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of issues with teen pregnancy and sexual assault. So yeah, that's something that I'm hoping we can work more with that community.
Um, how frequently do you travel for work? I know you said you've been to India 10 times. Obviously now it's a little bit different, but
Yeah. Well, okay, so I would say, I mean, there was a time when I was going twice a year to India, and I was going for about 3 weeks at a
Mhm.
time. And then I started going about once a year. And then there was one year where I went to Kenya and India
Mhm.
in the same year. Um, but I should also mention that my husband is from India, so I also
Okay.
go to India with him to visit his family, and I kind of put the two trips together.
Well, that
So
makes sense.
there's personal reasons to go as well as professional reasons, but in terms of traveling for work, it's about once or twice a year.
Nice.
Honestly, like I could probably not go to India and we could still do all of our programming, because there are so many tools online for
Mhm.
us to be able to connect. Um, that being said, there is something really special and really important about having the in-person time together
Mhm.
that that I would lack if I weren't able to go. So it's a hard balance. I mean, we can survive during this year of lockdown, possibly a year of lockdown, and doing everything over Zoom and connecting with
Mhm.
everybody over Zoom. But I also already have established this relationship with the two schools in India, right? So
Mhm.
that's already been established. But if it was with a brand new organization in a brand new country, that would be tough. I think that there would need to be an in-person visit of some kind in order to build a relationship there.
Yeah, because one of the questions I have as, like, a general question I ask, is, do you believe communication remotely is enough to sustain a relationship?
I would say, I think yes and no. I think it's a little complex,
Yeah.
um, because I would say that I traveled to India to develop this relationship, but our students who are from India, students from Kenya, students from New York, they're not actually traveling anywhere to meet each other. They're doing
Right.
all of the connecting online. And I think they do feel a sense of camaraderie. I think they do feel a sense of community and connection when they get to see each other online and meet each other and talk, see each other's faces. And like, it definitely would be probably more special and magical and important and meaningful to meet in person. But I do think that there's a lot more connectivity and meaning than we think in a digital world. And I kind of like, I wanna keep exploring that, because I think that there's so much we can do. And it actually, that having an online space to meet has opened up so many possibilities and so many opportunities that our students otherwise wouldn't be able to do this. For example, our two groups, the Bronx group and the India group, can actually meet each other in real time on Zoom. We never were able to do that before, because the girls in India weren't using Zoom, because they were only using the any kind of connection internet stuff at school, which is at a different time zone than when our girls were working on their computers. So now that everybody's at home using their own devices, we can be a little bit more flexible with that. And like the other day, we had one student in the Bronx who was in our class, and all of a sudden she was in the car, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going with my family to visit my grandma." But she could still be in our class, like
Yeah.
otherwise she wouldn't have been
Well,
able to go at all.
you're going to grandma's.
Yeah, so I think that there is a lot of opportunity for connection, for authentic connection in a technological world, in a virtual space. And I'd like to see where we go with that. But I do think that having the in-person connection is crucial. So I think both.
Yeah.
Both.
But it would be interesting to see down the road, how close they are, and I really, really hope that the global sisterhood really does stay with them, and, maybe down the road one day, of course, after all COVID's over and these girls are, safe to travel and everything. It'd be interesting to see if like there could be some sort of reunion or some sort of meetup, and finally meeting each other, like having that finally,
I have long-term vision, a long-term goal to have something like that where we can bring the girls together in real space and bring them on a trip. I mean, that we would have to multiply our budget by quite a few zeros, but in order
and
to
just
do that,
all the coordination and planning and scheduling and
visas and all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So,
but
I would love to do something like that one day.
Yeah, that would be really cool. So what are your long-term goals for the other side, over the next year, 2 years? Like you said, you mentioned one just now, but that would be
that's a very long-term goal. But yeah. I'm really glad that you're asking that question, because I feel like it's important to acknowledge the fact that I am a white, cis, abled person who is in a position of leadership in a nonprofit which works with marginalized communities and communities of color. And this is not new. There are so many white women who are cisgendered and able who are leading nonprofits, and as well as their boards and board leadership and donors, kind of like who's holding power in the nonprofit space, when the people that are trying to be uplifted, or the services that are being given, are so often with people who are underprivileged and often of color or disabled, or all of the different ways that could be, that where those intersect. And I've been doing a lot of internalized thinking about that, like thinking a lot about that, and doing workshops and reading and trying to really look in the mirror and see what is my vision for this organization when I remove my name from it. Like, what does it look like? And it's hard. I think it's really hard for founders. It's called founder syndrome, for founders to really step back. And I've been doing a lot of that in the past 2 years, and especially in the most recent kind of surge of racial justice movement. something that I've decided is that I do want to step away from this leadership position and hand it over to a woman or a person of color who can mirror the communities that we're working with. And my long-term goal for the organization is that the organization can stand on its own 2 feet, serve girls around the world, and also be an organization which is not only diverse but inclusive and equitable. And it's something that's, it's a big deal for me to say that, and I haven't really come out too publicly about that, so this is kind of my first public statement about that. But it is important to me that this organization thrives, and in order for it to thrive, I think it needs to have a leader who can represent our mission more authentically. And even if I'm not in the organization officially, I probably would be on the advisory board or something like that. I could sleep feeling extremely proud of the work that not only that what I have done, but what the whole family has built. And we really are like a family, the staff, the board, the advisory board, volunteers, and the students. So that's one of my long-term goals, which is like probably in the next 2 or 3 years that will happen. So right now I'm working on building out this position so that it's not so closely linked to me as and that's really hard as a founder. It's like there are so many things that happen because people know me personally or connect with me personally. It needs to be that it just stands on its own without it being about me. So that's one thing. And also just we've initiated a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and we're going to start working on how to make the whole organization more equitable and diverse. And when we're talking about intercultural work, we're talking about working with girls in different communities around the world. This is so important, that we don't have that kind of like white savior thing happening. And
That's the term, when you first were talking about it, it's the term that was in my head, white savior. But,
and it happens, and like that's definitely I'm not gonna like hide the fact that that's something I'm reckoning with as somebody who went and volunteered in a poor village in India, and then like it stole my heart. I mean, there's certainly something going on there, so I'm gonna come clean about that. But I think that's important to think about.
I think that's really, admirable for sure, but also I think at the end, like that's where a lot of, I feel like nonprofits and companies are trying to, for as much sadness and what's come out of some of the recent things that have been going on in this world, like I said, and I'm really glad the silver lining, I hate to use that word, but silver lining has been everyone taking a look in the mirror and saying, what could we do differently? At least start with that, right? What can we do differently? And I think that is really admirable. And like you said, you've been doing it prior to anything more recent.
I started thinking about it before, but this has really like pushed, I think, something I think that what you're saying, like, what can we do? What can I do differently? Like, how am I contributing to this structural racism issue that we have? And what can I do to help that? Because it has to start on a personal level in order for it to become a collective movement.
And at the end of the day, you do need some sort of, like you said, not just necessarily a leader, but people representing the organization on its own, and being, like you said, the other side, intercultural theater, being on its own, and not that it doesn't matter who's right running, and at the end of the day, it doesn't even have to be just one person. It could be multiple. I'm sure you've thought about this as well. It could be multiple individuals who are,
for sure,
doing whatever the day-to-day or I don't know. I'm sure, I feel like it's one of those things that's like, you'll get there. And I think like the transition, you're starting that transition internally, and it's going to be a matter of time where, it's going to be in a good place. And I think it's one of those things too. I think about it when you leave a company and you have, you have a boss or a manager who says like, well, I don't want you to go. And it's like, sometimes you have to let things go for them to thrive.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's probably
yeah.
where it is. You have this baby that been nurturing over 10 years. And sometimes you have to kind of
I have to let them go
let it
off to
go.
college and find their identity on their own. I can't be. It's like that. I really do think of it like it's in a teenage phase right now, where it's like
Yeah.
finding its own identity, and it's like,
Yeah.
Mom, you can't tell me what to do anymore, and so
Now and then you're going to have empty nest syndrome. No,
I
you
have a
won't,
little
because you're, like I
emptiness.
said, you're going to be, I'm sure, I mean, you're not going to like leave and like goodbye. I
Bye
mean,
bye.
you're going to
No,
be,
no. I'll be involved for sure. I will have to find a job. That's a different conversation. But honestly, I'm sure that whatever I do is going to have to do with education, with something international, and probably related to India, or at least I would keep managing or connected to the India
Mhm,
side of what's
of
happening in
course.
the other side itself. Yeah.
And what I really loved about the other side is just that I feel like everything that I wanted for this little podcast interview series, I feel like it like I know I had asked you if you were interested and you said yes. And then as I was reading it over the last few weeks, I'm thinking like this entirely embodies exactly what I want to talk about in this series. Like
That's great.
it's a, aside, it's a nonprofit, but you're doing something where communication is key,
Mm-hmm.
and it's intercultural. I mean, it's in the title, intercultural, but it's intercultural. You're bringing people together for a global good.
Yeah.
Like this idea of sisterhood and the idea of storytelling and this idea of gaining confidence and rising above and giving. You would think like theater, like you said, like theater. You're not just putting on plays and you're being a drama teacher and you're reading Shakespeare and like that's cool, but you're doing something more than just you're using theater as a tool for greater good. And I love it, and I just love that idea that this is happening. I had no idea, and I'm so glad that Carrie introduced us and
Yeah, me
let me
too.
know about this.
She's
Shout out to
on our
Carrie.
advisory board, and she was a co-founder. So it's great. That's a great, perfect full circle.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just a little shout out for the other side. How can we help you?
Well, I would say the easiest thing you can do is follow us on our social media accounts. We have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, The Other Side NYC. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any particular questions or interest in volunteering or learning more about what we do and where we work. And my email address is theothersidenyc@gmail.com. And the most concrete way that you can help us right now is by making a recurring monthly donation. So in COVID times, we have a hard time predicting where our funding is going to come from and what's going to happen with the economy. And we don't know if we're going to make the same money we made last year. So a monthly recurring donation means we can count on that every month. And just to give you some structure around that, $30 a month will support one girl through our program for 1 month.
Mhm.
So if you do a monthly recurring donation of $30, then you will support one girl for the year. And if it's okay with you, Allison, I can give you a link that's linked
Yeah,
specifically to our monthly recurring page
sure.
that you
I'll
can.
put that in the video, and then we'll.
Great.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I'm like
Yes, thank
very happy
you.
we got a chance to talk today, and I look forward to hearing what goes on with the other side. We'll have to catch up, hopefully
Yeah,
after
things
the
change so
pandemic's
fast, so
over.
we'll
But
see what happens. Yeah, keep in touch, and I'll let you know if we have more events coming up and things like that. So
yes, I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you
All
so much,
right.
Allison.